Living my bucolic life, free, healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn, then time to move them out again. Red parchment pastures, beautiful high houses, the view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. I don't have my dresser behind me anymore. I've been rearranging things, very excited about that. And I have a new microphone. I just got it in the mail. This time it is this brand. We'll see how it goes. It came with this huge cord. It's got like literally a 20-foot cord. So I have it all wrapped up and stuck in this little sack that's hanging on me like a colostomy bag or something. But if it works, and I'll be happy with that. So if you see me walking around with this big black bag hanging on me, that's the microphone wire. Anyway, today's project is going to be this pattern. It's a fun, different type of a blouse, and you can probably see it better here. Instead of darts, well, it has darts, but it has a lot of them, and they're kind of like tucks, okay? And I'm going to be doing this one here with the sleeves. So it's got a whole bunch of little, like, radiating tucks instead of darts for shaping, which is different. It's kind of fun. And to make it even more fun, I am using a flannel plaid. All right, it's 100% cotton. I have pre-washed it. I have pre-dried it. It's a printed plaid, so the back is just plain. Here we go. So if it's, you know, I think that a plaid will really be able to show where those lines are because it's going to make the lines on the plaid slightly offset. So I think that'll be fun. And who doesn't like a plaid shirt in cold February, you know? So let me go ahead and get started cutting it out. As usual, I am going to be cutting out my size 16. And I'm just looking to see if they have a finished bust measurement on the back of the pattern, and they do not. So when I get it out, I'm going to be, as usual, looking at the arm, come on, focus here, the arm width measurement and the bust measurement just to make sure everything's going to fit right. Okay, I've been studying this for a few minutes here, and this is meant to be a fairly fitted blouse, you know, it's got shape to it, and I think the sleeves are meant to be fairly straight. And I say fairly because you do see ease here. Looking at the sleeve, it says the finished length for this bicep is 15 1/4. So basically, when you measure straight across at this bullseye, you can take that measurement, subtract out 1 1/4 for your seam allowances, and what you're going to be left with is 15 1/4. So here's my thought. Sleeves, I need comfortable sleeves. It's one of my pet peeves. Really tight fitting sleeves just annoy me. The standard amount of ease that you need in a sleeve, according to Donald McCune, you know, who knows all, is 3 inches for a straight sleeve. And I need to add another 3/4 of an inch in order to get my 3 inches of ease total, okay? Because my bicep is 13 1/2. What I need to do in order to get the amount of ease I need is to add 3/8 of an inch to each side, okay? So I'll be dealing with that. Also, the bust measurement on this is 42 inches, okay? Which, you know, I can get into, but it doesn't have a lot of ease. So since I'm going to be adding onto my sleeve, I am going to add to my blouse bodice front piece also The back should be fine. It's just, you know, excessive fullness right here because patterns are traditionally made for a B cup. I'm bigger than a B cup, so the added I need is here, not necessarily on my back. So I'm going to be making my changes on my front piece here. Okay, so I'm going to start with this sleeve, and I've decided I'm just going to explode it out with a bicep blown up adjustment here instead of rocking it or anything like that. I think that'll work better for what I want right now. So this fold line is on dead center, and that should line up with the bullseye, which should line up with these center top dots there. So I'm just going to get my ruler and draw a line straight up. Well, it's not exact, but I'm going to line up this fold line here with my dot on the top. My bullseye will just be slightly offset. That's okay. So I've got this line drawn here. Now I'm going to draw a line horizontal. I want to make sure my grain line, you know, is on with my grid, and perpendicular to that, lining up my ruler with the bullseye, making sure it's straight. I'm drawing, oops, I'm not doing that. I'm going to draw a line straight across here. So now what I'm going to do is cut up this center line up to the dot for my size. I'm not going to go past it, okay? And I'm also going to cut across this line up to about 5/8 of an inch from the edge, you know, give or take-ish. And the same over here. What this is going to do, it's going to keep my sleeve cap basically the same size, keep this the same length and everything, but I'm going to be able to get that extra 3/4 of an inch. So I got a piece of tracing paper that I need to get underneath here, so let me put that down. Getting my tape, my ruler, I am ready to go. So placing all of this back on top here. The first thing I'm doing is just kind of laying it down and letting these bottom pieces overlap on top of the top ones, you know, just because it makes my life easier. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to be taping this together just to keep this so that this is the original width down here. Now that I have this taped together down here onto my tissue paper, let's see if I can move you up, okay, right here. At this bullseye, I want that, what did I say, 3/4 of an inch? You know, let's go big and bold and make it an inch between it, you know? Why not? So I've got a space an inch wide here. Just gonna let my ruler sit there to hold it so it doesn't float away. Put a piece of tape straight across there. Now these are overlapped a bit here, which is good because that's what's gonna make it so that this top can reshape itself. All right, so now I'm just gonna put another piece of tape, making sure everything's straight there, up here at the top, and right about here to hold all of that together, all right? So now everything is good. My center dot up here is still where it should be, so can't see that. So this dot up here is still where it should be. So when I go to mark it, that's where it should be. These dots are still where they should be. Everything's gonna fit. The only thing I need to do is I cut this fold line. Okay, this is for this type of fun dartage stuff here. So I'm just going to draw myself a new one that is right in the middle of these two, you know, at about the same height, and comes straight down the middle, okay? So now that's going to be my new mark for my little pin tuck type thing. I could just clip this across here and up here, and now my sleeve will go around my massive bicep. Okay, so now let me get the front piece over here. Okay, so now I'm going to deal with the bodice front, and I am just going to be doing a basic traditional full bust adjustment on this. And there's just a few steps. You need tracing paper or some kind of a backing tissue paper, some tape. So I'm going to get my ruler, and from this bullseye that they're going to give me, I am not going to be worrying about lowering it and everything because there's not a particular bust line that goes straight to it. You know, so I am just going to draw a line through that bullseye, straight down, making sure this line I drew is parallel to these. It's right here. Now I'm going to take one through the bullseye, coming straight over here to the side seam. Okay. And then finally, I'm going to come up from this bullseye, and I'm going to hit a point just above where this notch is. Okay, so I've got these 3 lines drawn right here. Okay, so from this bullseye straight down, from the bullseye straight over, and then up just above the notch. Now I need to get cutting on these. Okay, so I have made some slices here, and I put my tracing paper underneath. Okay. So I'm just going to line this back up so that the straight up here is on the straight of my table. Put a little weight there so it doesn't go anywhere. All right, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to be adding a 1 inch. I think that's kind of overkill, but at the same time, the last thing I want is to throw my shoulders back like this young version of Celine Dion is doing right here, and have my buttons be straining. I don't want that. I don't like that. So again, with this up here on this grid line, that's going to give me a place to start. Let me move this weight here. Okay, so at this point here, I have this slice cut open all the way to the bottom. I have this slice cut open all the way out here. I have this slice, hang on a second, I did not cut this long enough. I have this slice coming up into the armhole, cut up to where the seam allowance area is, like that, okay? So the first thing I want to deal with is my 1 inch that I want to add. And so if I put my ruler right here, so at 1 inch is the edge of the paper underneath there, I can line this up next to that. Let me throw another weight on here, okay, just to keep that in place for right now. Okay, so I am now lowering this point. This isn't going to be exact, but I'm lowering this point so that I am also adding about 1 inch space from this point to this point, okay, and I can see that from my grid down here. So I have that there. And now I need to bump this part up here so that matches like that. Okay, so I just threw another weight on here to hold that in place. So now I'm going to tape this part so that this up here stays where it should. Oops, I got my little tape folded there. Okay. But I'm going to need to deal with this because the last thing I want is to add another dart. So I'm going to incorporate this new dart space into these fold lines. So just to hold things in place, I'm going to come down here, and in this corner down here, I'm just going to put a piece of tape to keep this corner taped to my tissue paper so it stays where it needs to, okay? Okay, so I moved all my weights because I think I have everything taped where I need it to stay where it needs to be. So I put a little piece of tape right here. So now you can see I have like this dart area. I don't want a dart here. I'm going to try to pull it into these two, okay? So I've never done one exactly like this before, but we can make it work. Before I start cutting this, I am actually going to come in here and draw a line at the point where this is parallel, just so I have a reference point to match it up to, okay? So what I did just now was draw a line right here along that edge on my tissue paper so I can see where that's supposed to line up, okay? So this bottom corner down here I have taped. It's staying where it needs to. And let's see, I am actually going to tape it here also. All right, yeah, right there also. It's these two that I'm going to be opening up. So with that, I'm going to cut these two fold lines for the size that I cut out. That one up to the tip, and this one up to the tip. So what this is going to be doing is, instead of a tiny little fold line, it's going to be making these into darts. Okay, so if I open this up so that this now comes back over here, if I split the difference between these two, I get a place right about there, okay? Ignore for right now that I have some gapiness up here. I'm just going to flatten that out. And I'm also going to redraw my side seam here so everything matches. But this gives us a good-ish idea of what to do. So that looks pretty good. I have this matching here. I have these openings here. Let me just go ahead and put a piece of tape up here. Okay. And I'm also going to tape a little crease right there, hold all of that stuff together, and a little crease right there, hold all of that stuff together. I know this is getting really confusing. I'm so sorry about that. I honestly was not planning on doing anything this extreme when I opened up this pattern, but sometimes you just get on a roll. So anyhow, this is what I have now. Now what I need to do is smooth this out. But I'm not going to actually do that yet because I'm going to need to deal with this first. I'm going to deal with this bottom part here first. So I have added length to the front, okay? Because, like I said, a boob is a 300, or not 360 degree, it's 180 degree, you know? So let's say this little dish here, I needed to add width this way and this way to make it work, okay? I'm going to take this back piece here and let's see if I can find an easy spot here. Yay. Well, it looks like on the pattern that the back piece is a little bit shorter, even, you know, taking this into consideration. We're going to assume that they're supposed to be the same, okay? So if I line up this lengthen or shorten here double line, that should be the front on the front, the same on the front and the back, okay? So if I line that up there, that's going to tell me that at this point here is where I want the bottom of my blouse cut line to end. All right, and I am just going to kind of pencil that in, blend it in, trim this here so I have a new bottom. Curvy little shirt tail kind of bottom, okay? Just cut that off there. All right, so that's my new bottom. It's going to match with this pretty well. Then this part of the front is slightly shorter than this part is now, okay? So I need to lengthen this. What they usually want you to do is insert something. So if I have these lines lined up on my straight here, if I see right here, this is very arbitrary, wherever you want to make your cut so it's like not very interfering. I can see right here, this line can go straight across that way. So I'm going to cut that right here. and bring it down, and I can see on my grid that this point right here is about the right length. So I'm going to place that there. I'm running out of tape. Of course I am. Look, I'm out of tape and I'm at that obnoxious part that doesn't stick down there. All right, I need to take a break, run downstairs, try to find some more tape. But we're almost done, so I will be right back. I did not find Scotch tape, but I found a big roll of package tape, and that will do for right now. So I'm just putting a couple pieces down here to keep what we did. Oopsie. Where it's supposed to be. Now that I have this bottom set, I'm just going to trim straight across here. I have my bottom. Up here at the armhole, that is good. I'm just going to trim around that. That is my armhole. Okay, I can actually just cut straight across here at this point and have that little scrap to play with. Okay, so now I have to deal with these. So, like I said, instead of these being little pin tucks, like these three, these are going to be darts. So what I need to do is mark them as if they are darts. And you know what? It's going to be a lot easier to do this if they are taped. So I am going to tape them down. Oh, no, don't do that. I think I did it wrong. And the tape is not forgiving. Oh, package tape. Why have you done me this way? Oh, hang on a second. This is going to be bad. Hold on. It's like magnetic and it just attracted it and I was not ready for it. Okay, so I have to recut this because that is not where it's supposed to be. How annoying is this? Okay. Package tape. Oh, that is so annoying. Oh my gosh. Look, I'll show you what I'm talking about. When I set it down, it just, everything sucked up to it and grabbed it, and I got wrinkles here, and this is way too wide apart. I was just trying to tape it in place where they were. And they're not there now, and the tape has worked a wrinkle into it. So just give me a second. I need to, I'm going to get this as close to as it was before. Hopefully you won't have to deal with any of this kind of an issue. And I will be right back. Okay, I think I've just about got it here. Just note to self, use Scotch tape, you know? Anyhow, what I was going to be working on is this side piece over here. And the point was I was going to be folding these at where the apex is. So the easiest way to do this, let me get you over here to the edge of my table. You can see I'm going to line up where that edge is and about midway in the dart. Make that fold. I'm going to fold it in half and obviously not pin it, but I'm going to put a little clip right there, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing here at the apex point of this, and about midway I'm going to make a little fold line, fold that in half, and if I can find another clip over here, just put a little clip right there. So what that is going to do, as you can already see, it's giving me a nice shape over here. But with these folds, and I'm going to want these darts to lay down. So I've got one here, and I've got one here. And if I press them both so that they are laying down, that's going to show me where I need to trim the cutting line of my pattern so it will work, okay? So I could just trim it straight across, so those are going to be both pushed down. These are going to be regular little pin tucks. Those are going to be darts. So if I take these clips off now and flatten this, you'll see it comes to little bitty points there. That's okay. Those will disappear. And all of this is done, except I need to add a couple marks because these are dots now, or darts. I'm going to put a circle mark at the very tip of that one and this one here. And then down here at the seam allowance space, I'm going to put a circle mark. I got so many layers of packing tape right there. It doesn't want to go through. There you go. I got a circle mark here and here to match up. And I'm going to put one here. Takes 2 cuts this time. And here to match up. Okay, so now I have all of that done, those marks in, and now I think I'm actually ready to cut out my fabric. So I hope that wasn't terribly confusing, you know. It works, it does what it needs to, and yeah. So let me go ahead and cut out my fabric. All right, so now I'm going to get started cutting it out. And yes, I know this is a plaid. Matching plaids is one of my favorite puzzles in the world, but I'm not going to be matching. I'm going to make sure everything is on the straight, but I'm not going to be matching because I can't match the side seams. Okay, it would be impossible because the back is flat. The back doesn't have any darts or tucks. The front does. So the checks on the front will necessarily be smaller. Okay, so there's no way the side seam can match. The shoulder seam, no one's really going to be looking at your shoulder that closely to make sure that this diagonal is exactly on the same diagonal as the back. They're not. A sleeve, the sleeve cannot match up here, and because these two don't match, it would be kind of pointless to try to work crazy to make sure that this sleeve matches the back because I can't make it match the front exactly. So you see where I am. So I'm just going to make sure everything is on the straight. I did want to point out that this is a printed plaid. It's not a woven plaid. And because of that, you know, I tore it, I serged it, I washed it, but it's printed slightly off. And you can see here when I lined up to make sure that this line matches up with that line in the back. This is about 1/2 inch lower. I am placing this all based on the printed plaid, not the woven grain, okay? Because it's a lot more obvious that way. So I'm just going to place them the best I can, cut them out on the straight, and I will be right back. Okay, so before I get started, I need to kind of strategize my tucks here, and the pattern calls for the tucks to be on the outside, so you can kind of see it's a little 3-dimensional there. And if I make my 2 darts that I just did traditional dart method, those 2 will show up looking like seams, the rest will look like tucks. So I just got a little scrap here just to play with it, just to see what I can do. And you can see that it's going to show up very dramatically in the check, but you know, that's kind of what I thought in the beginning. So this is a regular tuck, you know, it's just sewn together, and that's the inside. This one is a dart that I made to look like a tuck, and I think I'm going to use this method. It's only for those 2 up near the top, so I think it'll be okay. So basically what I did is first I made my dart, and then I pressed it open, you know, and then I folded it wrong sides together, and then made the dart over, or I made the tuck over my dart in the same method, you know. And that's what I'm going to do. I think that that will disguise my darts and make them blend with the rest of it. They're going to be much more dramatic in the way that the check is very different, you know. Here it's pretty close. Here it's going to be wow, but that's okay. That's all right. I don't mind. I think it'll be fun that way. So there is a lot of stuff for me to mark on this pattern here. this is going to be the tricky part. I need to mark my darts on the wrong side, but all of these tucks on the right side. So what I'm going to do is first mark all of my tucks on the right side, okay? And I'm even going to get those out of the way. And then I'm going to come back and do my 2 darts on the opposite side. So the way I'm going to do this is for my, basically this one, these 2 bottom ones, and all of these up here, I'm going to be using my typical method where I stick my little piece of scrap leather up under the tissue. At the end of the tissue, I'm going to punch a hole. I've got a couple layers there for it to go through. And I'm actually going to do one at the seam allowance, 2. So I'm going to have 2 dots that I can then draw a line between. And with my black heat erasable pen, I'm going to make those 2 dots. For this center fold line, you can kind of see that it continues up here. So I can see that it should be, you know, a little less than 1/2 inch from the end here. So I just picked a point that looks about right, that's going to kind of work with these, and punched my hole right there. All right, so for my pin tucks, for some reason my camera is being very dark right now. Maybe if I bring her up, you can see I'm just drawing lines connecting the end point all the way through to the one point that I kind of punched on the seam allowance to get those fold lines so I can see them. And I have tested out on a scrap to make sure that my heat erasable pen completely vanishes on this flannel, and it does. If you're going to do this, make sure, because these lines are, you know, big and bold and on the right side, so you want to make sure that it will disappear. Okay, so now that I have all of these tucks drawn out on the right side, I'm going to mark my 2 darts on the wrong side. So I just realized, remember when, way back when, I was comparing these 2 to make sure that my ending point would end at the right place? And I said, oh, it looks like the one's longer than the other. Of course it is longer. This side needed to be longer thereabouts to incorporate the extra space that these pin tucks are going to have. So there's the answer to that. I still think we're going to be fine, but if you're ever curious ahead of time why one pattern piece is longer, it's because those tucks are going to take up like an extra 1/2 inch or so. Okay, so these pin tucks I'm going to do first, and they're supposed to be at a 1/16 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is fold it on that line, and I might just stick a pin straight across here at the very top, because since it's going to be on the fold, it'll be hard to see that point. And when I go to stitch it, I need to stitch it at a 1/16 of an inch in. Okay, and I have a couple different ways to gauge that. I have this presser foot, which is an edge stitching foot, and it is gauged at a 1/16 of an inch. So it's really handy because I can put the edge of my fabric right here, and when I stitch with my edge of my fabric along this little guide blade thing here, I get 1/16 of an inch. I also have a narrow foot, and if I use the side of my narrow foot, I get a 1/16 of an inch. So I got those. You can also just eyeball it, you know, or do whatever foot you have, but that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to put a pin down here, and at my sewing machine, start up at the top, come down when I get close to my pin. I don't know that they actually say, they don't say to taper them in. When I was doing my little sample, I kind of tapered them in like a dart. They don't say that. So I think I'm just going to stay out at 1/16 of an inch. When I get to this point, I'm going to put 2 tiny little back stitches just to anchor it in place and leave it like that. And I think that'll give it a very defined pin tuck. I have found that it's easier to actually get this started on the inside point than on the outside point. So I'm just going to fold it, see where that little dot is right there. Sorry about that. And can set that in here with my edge up against my edge guide, my needle positioned where I need it to be to start going down. I just took one big stitch. I'm going to take a couple little back stitches to anchor that in, and then fold it on my guideline the rest of the way down here, and go. And just make sure that nothing is where it should not be down here at the bottom. Okay, have my little back stitch to anchor it in. And there you go. So I end up with little tucks like this. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm doing all of my pin tucks. I'm not ironing them yet because as soon as I iron them, my marks will go away, and I need to do my darts before I can iron it. I want to show you one other way to make pin tucks because I forgot I have my old school tuck guide here, and you probably, a lot of us have these things, you know, stuck in a box. But it's got these little guides, and you can make it make different size tucks. So there's different guides, like I said, and I am running it what I think is a 16th inch tuck. 16th inch tuck. Let me see here if I pull it out. Yes, okay. So if you can see, this is a 16th of an inch there, so that makes a nice tuck. If you've never used these, but you have one, this is the way it works. Well, here, let me just take it off here. Looks like this, okay? Now it's made so that you can put fabric through this way for a hem, or this way for an edge, like we have here, okay? This guide and this guide should be the same relative distance. This is the hole, oopsie, this is the hole where your needle is going to go, okay? And you can usually adjust this. Mine has a couple different settings. I have my little ball over here. If I push it, with mine, it slides off as a foot where you can put all your attachments on in a thingy. I'm sure there's a better name for it. And I can slide this over. You can see here, I see a full hole for my needle, but I can slide it over more. And at the point where it's in the center on mine, it's a 16th of an inch because it's where that hole lines up with this right there. Okay, if I push it over a little more, it makes, if I can do it, because it's got a spring there. Well, I had it there before, trust me. When I pushed it over all the way, it makes an 1/8 of an inch. There you go. So now, if I have this tiny little hole there, and my needle does go through that tiny little hole, that makes it 1/8 of an inch pin tucks, okay? So when I first got it out at this setting, it made them this wide, which is an 1/8. And then when I moved it over to the other side, it made them that small, which is about a 16th of an inch. If I grab my newer one, yeah, that lines up exactly. So, you know, there's some fun things. I hope you might have one of these laying around. Yeah, fun deals. Okay, so I've got these 3 tucks done here. Now I need to make these darts. So the way I'm going to do it is like I usually do, down here at the bottom, stick my pin down one of my marking dots, back up the other, stab myself, come up here and pinch it at the very top. Okay, that's going to give me my little crease. Tuck that pin in there, put one up here, and so that I can sew it. When I sew it, I start at the outside edge and work my way in. And I will do a back stitch at the end, but I'll be very careful, I promise. So let me go ahead, pin both of these. Actually, I'm going to sew one, and then after that I'll pin the next one, because this is very tight in here, and I think if I have too many pins going right there, it could be a little tricky. So, but just trust me, I will be doing all 4, 2 on this side and 2 on the other side, the exact same way. Once I have these darts down, I'm going to go ahead to the ironing board and press everything. Okay, so here's a dart, here's a dart, these are my tucks. These three I pressed down, okay, because you gotta choose a side. I'm choosing to press them down. I think they look lovely, but you can see my darts are just plain darts. So I've pressed the bottoms of my darts down also, and now that they're nice and flat, it'll be a whole lot easier to work in a new tuck. So I'm just going to fold it at that dart, go back to my sewing machine, and basically sew a tuck right on top of the line for that dart. And I'm going to do that for both of these, okay? For my neck, I chose to press these tucks down towards the center front because this is my shoulder, so I'm pushing them down this way, okay? Okay, so this is what it's going to look like, which is kind of fun. I've got all my little ridges going on here. Now that I have those done, I'm going to go ahead and serge all the way around both of my front bodice pieces and my back bodice piece that I cut on a fold that we have not dealt with yet. Just to get that out of the way, just serging just barely around the edges, trying not to cut anything off, but just trying to keep it so it will not unravel. Welcome back to the next day, and at this point I have the back piece serged all the way around, but I have a couple big darts I need to put in here. Actually, I need to mark it on the wrong side, so just give me a second to flip this over. And I need to, as always, punch out all of the circles that go along with the dart for my size. So I'm going to do that really quick and mark my darts. Now, since I'm not going to be in danger of erasing my marks, I'm going to go ahead and also mark my little circle here for my shoulder placement. There's a triangle up here, which marks my shoulder placement up here, which will come in handy for the collar. So I've got all of that cut out. Usually I clip my notches before I do my serging. I just didn't this time. You know, who knows why? I don't even understand my own brain sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and make my little clips for my notches with my heat erasable pen. I'm going to color in all of my little dots here. And for my big dart down here, I am going to connect all of these like a big dot to dot, so I have guidelines to follow when I am sewing my dart. And I'm going to do all of these marks on the other side. Okay, so I'm marking this side too, and I am wearing my new dress. Love my springy dress. I had an appointment with my accountant this morning, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to wear it, be all springy and look all pulled together and everything like that. Just got home, looked in the mirror, and realized I have 2 huge hairs hanging off my chin. You know, what in the world is up with that? I don't even know. I don't even know. So now that's all I can think about is sitting there in those bright office lights staring at all those people with big chin hairs. But that is life, isn't it? Life of us. So you can see how I am drawing my dart lines here all the way down, and that's just going to give me a nice outline to follow as I put these together. So I wanted to show you I've got my dart pinned, and I'm using a very, very stable cotton flannel. So I'm just going to start at the top, make 1 long stitch. If you were using something very silky, slimy, moving around-ish, technically the way you're supposed to do is start in the middle, go down, start in the middle, go up, okay? My fabric's very stable. I'm not going to worry about that, so I'm going to make these 2 stitches right like that, and then when I'm done, press the dart allowance towards the center back. Okay, so this is what my back looks like now. I've got my darts in here. They are pressed towards my center back, as you can see. And I'm going to set this piece aside for a minute because I'm going to do a little more work to my fronts before I sew them together. So you probably noticed that I did not finish marking up my front before I did all of my pintucks because I didn't want them to disappear. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish making my front placket area And I'm going to put my buttonholes in right now. I just feel like getting that done while it's nice and flat and separate. Yes, it's very out of the ordinary, but I feel good about that. So let me get my ruler here. And if I measure from the edge, the distance between the cutting edge, one fold line is 1 inch, and the next fold line is 1 inch, okay? So that's easy to remember. So I'm going to turn this so it is wrong side up. So since this line here is 2 inches in, and when I fold it, that's going to give me that fold line. So I'm only going to mark one of them. My ruler is 2 inches wide, so I'm just going to place the edge of my ruler along the edge of my fabric here. It looks like it's curving because all of these are kind of making it want to curve and shape itself. So now what I'm going to do is do the same thing for the other side front. So we'll have two doing the same thing here. Fold this so it comes up to that line, press it, and then turn it and fold it again and press it. And that's going to give me my 2-inch placket like this in the front. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for both side fronts. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to come back and just run a row of edge stitching straight up the side here. Okay, so here is what it looks like on the outside. Now I want to show you when I overlap them, it's going to look like this. So the lines of my plaid are going to continue straight across. That's about as close as I am getting as far as matching these plaids right here. The other thing I tried to do as far as matching plaids was just making sure that this point was a similar place to that point on the back. Okay, but that's about it. So I am going to go ahead and get my buttonholes put on here. And I need this to be the side that my buttonholes are going to be on, because if I put that up on top, it just doesn't look as well. And you know what? Yeah, it is supposed to be this way, so you know, win-win. They call for 1/2-inch buttons. I am actually using some that are slightly bigger, but I think that they are so pretty. They're the shell buttons. And I love them. I rescued them off of something, I can tell, because I still have threads on here. But I'm going to be using these. So I need to get them marked first of all. So let me get this one pulled off here and start marking. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is draw my line that goes this way. And again, I have made sure my pen erases, so this is all good. This is a 1-inch distance here. So I'm going to draw my line at a 1/2 inch. I'm just drawing it all the way down. This will make sure that everything is in line this way. I think my pen is running out of ink. Hang on a second, let me refill her. Okay, new ink, and works well. So again, I am just drawing this line at this 1/2-inch point. And again, she kind of wants to curve, so I am just doing a little bit at a time to make sure it's nice and straight. Good. Then they give you this seam guide. It says upper edge up here, so that is what's going to line up at the top. And to make my life easier, I'm going to fold it so that I can see where these marks are. So folding it so the edge is like right about there. So if I place this up at the top of the cut edge, you can't see that. So if I place this up at the top of the cut edge and I'm just lining up my little guide here, I'm going to mark the top point for my buttonholes. I'm not marking the bottom because my buttons are going to be longer. And for my purposes, I only need the top, you know, and I'll reinforce that it's a T there. So there's 1 button, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and so forth. Okay, so now that I have those marked, I'm going to go over. Today, I am going to use the 15. I haven't used her in a while, and put my buttonholes on. So if you haven't seen it before, this is my buttonholer. Love these things. I can't use it on my Meister because this is for a low shank machine. My Meister is high shank. But basically you have these little cams in here. This one says 5/8. My buttons are closer to 3/4, so I'm going to look for one that is 3/4. This is as close, I think 13/16. It's about as close as I'm going to get. There's a line on the back, and I can see if I put my button there, it's inside the boundaries of that little line on the back of my cam. So I'm going to pop this in here. I recently took this apart, cleaned it up, and greased it, and go ahead and pop this onto my 15. Well, I did a test buttonhole on a scrap, and it looks like it's too long. I have a lot of buttonhole peeking out. You might be able to see it better on this way. I have a white thread in the bobbin. I don't want that much gap in my button. I want it to, especially front buttons when there's a possibility of strain. So I am going to actually size it down to a 5/8 inch buttonhole, and this is a keyhole buttonhole. So I have a little, so it's slightly bigger than a 5/8 because it does have the keyhole. So I'm gonna give this one a try. Okay, so here it is. Here is my little keyhole button, and I think it's going to work. So I'm going to cut it open with my little buttonhole scissors. And you may be asking yourself, why? Why would you put a keyhole button, which is usually for an outer garment, like a jacket or vest or something, on a blouse? And the answer is because I want to. And it's my project, and I get to do it the way I want. Now I have my little block here because in a keyhole it's a circle at the top. So I'm just going to use my little hole puncher and hopefully punch out that circle. Let's see if that worked there. Kind of did. Let me give it one more shot. Okay. So I've got it open up all the way to the top. I got my little circle punched out up there. And my button slides through without a whole lot of extra give, but I think that that's going to be the winner for me. So I'm going to go ahead and use this little template for all of my buttonholes. So if you've been around, you've probably seen this a lot of times, but I'm just going to run through it once. I just need a track and a starting point for my buttonholer. So I set my little crank back here to get it to the beginning point. Find that little cross part of the T. It's got marks, so I line that up with the line on my, there we go. So I line that up with the line here, put my presser foot down, and I should be able to just get going. You can adjust the width of your buttonhole, you know, if you want really, really fine edges, like for a nice dress blouse. You can make them really wide for like a coat. I have mine medium wide because this is a thick fabric. So here we go. Okay, so there's one done, and I'm just going to move it on down the road. Okay, I had to unplug my little thingy. It was completely impacted with stuff, so that happened. So now I have my little row of buttonholes going all the way down. So after I slice it open, kind of run my finger along the edge to pull out all of these little stray pieces of thread that are going to come back and just drive me crazy later. And so I can trim all of that out right now. And then I'm done with my buttonholes, and so I can not worry about that once the blouse is all sewed up. Okay, so now that I have all of this stuff done, I'm going to go ahead and sew my fronts to my backs up here at the shoulders and at the side seams down here, doing each of them at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then pressing the seam allowances open on both sides. And I gotta show you, I am not quite matching up exactly down here at the bottom, which is okay. What I'm going to do is just take it as much as I can. I think because of all the extra thicknesses and all of this going on here, it took it up a bit. Doesn't bother me. I'm gonna get it to this point, and then once I have this seam sewed, actually I can trim it right now. trim it so that they match and just kind of ease that down like that. It's all fine. I can reserge just that little bottom part when I'm all done. Okay, so my top, pressed it open. My bottom, what I did is I pressed both seam allowances towards the back just because this is so thick right here. Looks like I got something turned. That doesn't bother me. But since they're both being pressed towards the back, what I did is I came back and ran an edge stitching row on the back side just to reinforce and hold all of that there so it'll lay as flat as possible. And with all of this top stitching stuff going on here, I think it blends pretty well. Okay, so there's my bottom. Let me go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so I just have it pinned together wherever there's a button just so we can see how it's going to lay. And I can tell you I am very glad I did that full bust adjustment because I think without that this would have been too tight. But as it is, it's going to lay nice and flat. The shoulders are fitting right, and that's why I chose the size that I did because it's based on, you know, the shoulders, the armhole, all of this, all of that. And then I can just blow it out if I need a little extra fullness somewhere or shrink it down if I need some less. So this is what we have so far. These give some really cool shaping. I like that. And it is fitted right here. There's a little bit of extra right there, but that's how it's supposed to be if you look on the pattern. This is how it hangs on the model. So right now I am pleased, so yay. Okay, so we're gonna get started on the collar now, and what they're telling you is to stay stitch around this now. My fabric's very secure. I feel good about it. If I was using a iffy fabric, you know, one that would stretch when it's not supposed to, I would have stay stitched all the way around this before I even got started on these. So while it was still in 3 separate pieces, I would have run a row of stitching at a 1/2 inch seam allowance just at the edge to keep it from stretching out of shape. I feel good about this, but I did notice that on their pattern piece for the collar, let me grab these over here, they are using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I do not like doing collars with 5/8 inch seam allowance. It's just too bulky. So I will be trimming all of that down. Okay, so before I go put this back on my dress form, just to keep it safe, I'm going to show you my stay stitching that I've put around there. This is still a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I will be trimming a 1/4 inch off of that shortly, but going to work on the collar pieces first. Okay, so on a collar, I like to use about a 3/8 inch or 1/4 inch seam allowance. 5/8 is too bulky for me. And you can tell the seam allowance, if it doesn't say in the pattern, from the dots and the markings, the distance from the dot to the outside edge is going to be your seam allowance, and that is definitely 5/8. So, in case I want to use this pattern again, what I am going to do is actually, while it's still stuck on here, I am going to mark and trim off a 1/4 inch from this bottom edge. So I'm just going to, with my ruler, line up that bottom edge as a 1/4, and then by cutting a 1/4 inch off the bottom, that should let me end up, look at this, this is even wider than that. That should let me end up with a 3/8 inch seam allowance as I'm doing my sewing. Now over here, it looks like I'm going to be cutting off the markings for these little notches here. So I'm just going to move them straight up on top of that so I still have those. Okay, you know what? I'm going to put a pin in the middle just because this is a little bit tricky. Come this way and just trim off where I just marked it, which is a 1/4 inch off the bottom of the pattern piece. So now I have a pattern that looks like this. Now this band, it's the same thing. That is 5/8 from the edge. So I am going to cut off a 1/4 inch all the way here and here, doing the same thing where I just mark a 1/4 inch from the bottom of the pattern, make sure I have it pinned really well, and then slice the whole thing off. Because that way, if I'm going to use this pattern again, it will already be sized so that it's convenient for me. Okay, I'm going to need to interface both of these, so I am using this featherweight, which is a nice, it's got a lot of body, slightly crisp. I'm going to cut one on a fold of this and one on a fold of this and get them fused on. All right, as far as sewing on the collar, this outside edge here, I have not trimmed that, and that is still at 5/8. But because this interfacing does have a little bit of body to it, I am going to trim the corners. So what I'm doing is drawing a line at 5/8 just up here in the corners so I can see where everything is. Okay, so it looks like that. And I'm going to come back and trim that off. And now that I know where that is, I can just match it up over here on this side and do the same thing. That way, when I go to sew my collar, there won't be interfacing up here, and that will be less to try to work around when I want to get a nice sharp corner. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and fuse this to one of these pieces and also fuse this one, which again I trimmed a 1/4 inch off all the way around, you know, except for the fold, and fuse one of these onto one of my flannel pieces here, and I will be right back. Okay, so I am going to get started with my collar, and I'm sewing it slightly different, of course, than the instructions. But what I want to do is put this little circle here onto my collar piece, and I have them stacked together, the uninterfaced one on the bottom, the interfaced one on top, with the right sides together. I am not moving this circle. It stays where it is, but now it is at a 3/8 inch seam allowance from the edge instead of a 5/8. That's what I want. That is fine. Okay, but you can tell, again, 3/8 this way, but still 5/8 inch that way. So that way I know I need to sew this at 5/8. So what I'm going to do is not sew the sides yet. Okay, like I said, I'm doing this a little bit different. I am just going to sew across the top, the entire way across the top, you know, starting at the very edge at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so this is it. That's my row of stitching there. And I am going to be calling the one that has the interfacing, I'm going to be calling that my collar. I'm going to be calling the one without interfacing my undercollar, which is not seen, okay? So what I'm doing with my seam allowance pressed underneath the undercollar, and I haven't pressed this with an iron, just opened up. I'm going to smooth it out, and now I'm going to run a row of understitching on the undercollar side, right about here, you know, about a 1/16 of an inch in, all the way down, just like that, going through all of the seam allowance and everything underneath there. Okay, so now this is what it looks like on the outside. You can see my 2 rows, my second row of stitching right there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is come back, open this up, the seam allowance, and the side that has the interfacing on, I am going to trim that down to about half the width of what it is right now. So basically I am grading these seams. I'm taking this bulkiest one out first, and that's going to make it so that my collar will lay nice and flat without a big bump where my seam allowance is underneath it. So now that I have it like this, what I'm going to do is fold it, and understitching gives you a really nice fold. And I'm just going to see how it will look. See, the interface side is going to want to curl over so that it's not visible from the outside, but it's going to give a really nice edge. That's what I want, all right? And by doing that, it's going to roll to the undercollar side. So now that I'm going to sew the side seam, I want to make sure it's still rolling over to that undercollar side. Hang on a second. Let me just fold this whole thing in half this way. Okay, so it looks like this. So from the interface side, I don't see any stitching. It rolls over, and this is what I see on the undercollar side, all right? So when it looks like that, so you see your 2 rows of stitching at the very top. I'm gonna match up these sides here, and so this side at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, but not to the bottom. I have it marked on this side. I'm only sewing it up to this dot. I'm leaving the bottom part open. So from this dot all the way to the top at 5/8 on both sides. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. So first I'm going to trim my corner, leaving, you know, somewhere between an 1/8 and a 1/16 of an inch from the top of my stitching to my cut edge. And then come back in here, splitting these seam allowances open, and once again trimming the one that has the interfacing on it in half like that. So that is my new seam allowance on the side. And so at this point now I can turn it right side out, and once I get my little corners poked out, I will go to the ironing board and press it. I'm actually going to trim this just a little bit more, because this is quite the angled pointy collar tip, so that way there's less bulk in there. And I think my handy dandy chopstick is downstairs in the kitchen getting washed, so I'm just going to use my tiny little crochet hook, because I can reach in there in the corner and grab it and kind of pull. Don't want to pull too hard because I don't want to get things shredded, but that'll help me, excuse me, pull my collar point out. This is the right side. The wrong side has all the stitching, obvious. The right side does not. So let me go ahead and press this all the way across here. Okay, so now I have it pressed, and you can see this is my right side. This is my edge here. I just have a little bit of interfacing peeking out. But right here, you can see that the under collar is sticking out a little bit more. That's okay. That is just because it's curled that way. All right, I'm not going to pay any attention to that. What I need to do right now is I'm just going to put a couple pins to hold it in place and run a very narrow edge stitch along this edge here, probably about 1/8 of an inch in, just to hold these 2 pieces together. Okay, so after I ran my little row of stitching here, I just kind of trimmed the edge to make sure that everything was fairly even, and I am going to mark my center back right now, just folding it in half, putting a line right there, and on both sides, because that's going to help with my marking. And when I ironed it, I erased my little dot, and this little dot is important. But since I already sewed the outside edge, I'm going to line it up with my center back here to make sure I get the right spot. And okay, so you can see that the dot is on the very edge of the fabric right here. All right, that is where it's going to match up with the band dot up here. So even though it's just on the very edge, I'm marking it because when you're sewing these tiny things, sometimes it can get lost in the shuffle. So just put that right there. Okay, so now I'm going to set this aside for a moment and grab my collar band piece. And just like on the other, I want to make sure I get all of these things marked. So I have a shoulder dot up there. This top one I just showed you where it is going to match up with the collar, and this one down here is where it's going to match up with the blouse. So I've got that. I am going to transfer these markings onto my interfaced piece. Okay, so now I have this marked, those 2. This is my shoulder point, you know, center back, another shoulder, and these 2. So what I'm going to do is take this one, this is the one that has the interfacing on it, and grab my collar right here. This is the side of my collar where you can see the understitching, which is the under collar, which is the side with no interfacing, okay? I'm going to take my piece that has interfacing on it and I'm going to attach it to this. So you can see I'm lining up my center back first. Let me stick a little pin here. And then this dot that I drew, that dot has to go at the very edge of the fabric. So if I stick a pin through that dot and I line it up, I should be able to put it right here, right next to the edge of the collar, right there. Okay, so I'm going to get another pin while I have it just kind of held in place there. And stick it there. All right, now everything else in between here, we're just going to kind of stretch and ease it together. So you can see how it kind of wants the band to be too big. Just fold it, you know, fold it so that the bigger side is on the outside. Stick a pin there at the halfway mark. And do it again, halfway here. Just throw pins across the table while you're at it. And another one here. That's going to make it nice and it'll mold to your neck really nicely, okay? So I am going to pin it all the way around, matching this dot right here to this place right there and easing it all together on this side too. Okay, so while I have it pinned this way, I'm going to fold up this bottom edge at the level of this dot. I'm not going to do it the entire way across. I just don't like to do that ahead of time. But I'm just going to fold this little bottom edge and stick a pin in it here. And also on this side, fold up this little bottom edge up to that dot. And put a little pin going across it here. Okay, now, with all of this like that, now I'm going to get my other piece of band that does not have any interfacing on it and match it up to all of this and pin it together. Now, if you have a whole lot of easing going on and it really kind of freaks you out to pull it off and put another thing on, baste it first. And actually, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to get a needle and thread and just add about 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to run a row of basting stitches straight across here. So like for where you had to kind of curve it to ease it in, if I somewhat keep that same curve going as I baste it, it's going to really, really help it lay nicely by the time I flatten it out to put the other seam on. And you can see I'm not taking tiny stitches. They're pretty big, you know, but it's going to be enough to hold it really nicely. Okay, so now that that basting is done, I feel a lot better. And I have a crease here at my center back, but I'm going to go ahead and draw that on as well. And I think that might be about all I need right now. So I'm going to go ahead and line up my center back here, pin it on, come to this outside edge, and the interface side is folded up. This side is not. It stays downward. I'm going to leave that pin in there that's holding that little fold up, but put a couple extra out here. Now remember, this is a 3/8, 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch seam allowance here, okay? And that's why I can do this. If it was 5/8, if you try to do 5/8, you might hit this. You do not want to hit this side of your collar. And so now I'm just going to kind of work all of this up here, pat it down gently to let it find its way in the world. Stick a couple pins in. And I'll do the same thing for this other side over here. And then I can stitch it. Okay, so now I have it pinned on this way. All right, this is the correct side, what I would call correct side. So I'm going to go ahead to my sewing machine and stitch it. And just to give myself a little guideline so you can see what I'm talking about, if I have a 3/8 inch seam allowance, I'm going to be coming up about like this and aiming at this dot. Once I get to the dot, I can use my guide on my sewing machine or whatever to continue at 3/8 all the way down. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw it here because honestly it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of help to draw my little seam allowances. Just wants to take its time here, doesn't it? Okay. So I can follow this line and stitch all the way up, across, and then back down on this side. Alrighty, so I've got this sewn on here, and I am just, it's totally not necessary, but I am going to pull out my basting stitch here. Once I get it pulled out, I am going to be trimming around the curve. So let me show you here. Right here, I want to get a lot of this bulk out. So I'm just going to come in and trim that whole little curve down to about 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Another thing you can do is take little triangled notches out of it. Okay. And by doing it this way, if I can get my little notches out, when you pull it back, those little notches will like close up and you won't have extra bulk there. Both are valid, both are good. I could even put a couple little notches in here. Do whatever you need to, but the main thing is to get the bulk out of this corner, okay? I am also, hang on a second. All right, now that I have that, what I need to do is open this up and make sure that everything got sewed correctly. Look at that, how that matches up. Isn't that pretty? The way that I did my collar is I centered the collar center back piece and the band center back piece on the same point, like that, when I was cutting it out to get it so that these checks would match up. Obviously not this side, but this side did. So, sometimes it's a win or lose thing. I wasn't really paying attention to it. But anyway, let me go ahead, turn this all right side out. I'm going to press this so that this whole little seam allowance is pressed down. I have a nice edge right around the top, and I will be right back. After I pressed it, my big old seam allowance in here felt a little bit bulky, so what I'm going to do is come back and just trim across all of these layers at once with my pinking shears, just to kind of even out some of that bulk. I'm not really interested in grading it at this point. You can if you want to. The thing about pinking is it makes it kind of strange and vague as to where exactly the end of the seam allowance is, so it kind of camouflages it. So like instead of having a specific point where it's obviously the end of the seam allowance, now it's just kind of soft, and it's it's thicker here and it's thinner here, but you're not sure exactly where it is. That's what pinking does, so that's where I am right now. So let me go ahead and grab my bodice, and we're going to put the collar band onto it now. Now, if you remember, I still need to trim 1/4 inch off from around this neckline in order for it to match up with this neckline. So I am just going to eyeball it because I know that this is at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, okay, where that line is. So I'm just going to cut through halfway between the edge and there, and I think that that is going to be close enough. But having that stay stitching in there, is going to keep it from wanting to stretch out of sorts. Now I'm going to sew this on completely opposite from what the instructions say. They're going to want you to sew it to the outside first. I'm sewing mine to the inside first. So I'm going to take the piece that does not have interfacing on it, because when it ends up, it's going to be like this, okay? This is the outside of the collar, you know, that's what I want this way. If I did it the other way around, I'd have the wrong side of my collar showing, so I don't want that. So anyhow, what I need to do is find my center back. I did not mark that, so I'm going to do that right now. And this is my center back of my band. So I'm going to put this right side of my band against the wrong side of my bodice here. And for some reason, I did not mark my little triangle, which is important at this stage. So I'm just going to put my little edge of my folds there, and I can see, here's my triangle. I marked everything up here on my interface side, I just didn't put it down below. So, oh well. So, okay, so where this little dot is, that is what is going to match up with my shoulder seam, okay? That's the dot that is a triangle on the pattern. So I'm going to pin that at the shoulder seam here, pin at the shoulder seam there. The reason I'm doing it this way is because sewing the neckline with the non-interfaced side is a whole lot easier to get it to form than the interface side, okay? And you can see it's easy with a small seam allowance. It's very easy to make those match. All right, now up here where the very edge of this is, that needs to match up to the very edge of my placket here on my blouse front. So I am just going to pin those together so that that edge matches up. And make these fit nicely. Once I get this all pinned together, you can, if you're nervous about it, you can baste it. I'm going to go ahead and go straight to the machine and sew this at a small seam allowance, you know, about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way across. Okay, so that's what it looks like right now. I love this method because it's so easy to get it sewn on there without any puckers and things. So now, this is the beautiful part of it. On the outside, where we can look at our work and top stitch while we look, I can just very carefully turn my little piece under, match up exactly where I want it to go. And I don't press this ahead of time because it seems like when I do, it never lines up right. So folding it right now, I can lay it down so it is just covering that stitch line that I just did. Let me move you in some. Okay, so like right out here, I could just tuck all of that inside. Okay, make sure this is nice. Fold this up so it's just going to cover that stitching line. Get that little thing out and pin it down. In this way, when I come back and top stitch it, I'm looking at exactly what is on the public side, what the world is going to see, and I can make sure my edge stitching is going to go right along the edge here, okay? If for some reason it's not exactly in the right place on the inside, nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. You know, if it's up here and then down here and up here and down here, nobody cares. But on the outside, it's going to look perfect. So that is how I like to do things. So let me just finish pinning this, you know, carefully so it matches up nicely. And then I'm going to go and edge stitch all the way around the bottom here. All right, so I got the collar done. These little tucks are kind of partially hidden by the collar, but that's okay. So on the outside, it's nice, it's rolled, it's firm, you know. This is my little edge stitching I did all the way around, and that's just gonna hold everything extra securely there. On the inside, did it match up exactly? Well, no, not exactly, but close enough. You know, that's not going to bother me at all. On the outside part, it is fine. So I think I'm ready to go ahead and get started working on the sleeves. Okay, so you know what we have on this sleeve? Pintucks. So again, I need to be able to mark these, and I'm going to mark my tucks on the right side. There's also dots up here for easing and notches. I'll be marking these dots on the wrong side, but I'm going to take care of this part first. So just like on the bodice, I got my little piece of leather under there, and I am punching the holes out of the very tops of these fold lines. And remember, when I altered my pattern, my fold line is down in the middle here now, so I just mark the top of that and over here. And I'm also putting 3 little holes, probably about 1/4 inch away from the bottom. I just unscrewed my little dealie there. Get back, so that I have something to connect them to. So just like on the front, I'm going to draw these 3 dots. Lift up my pattern here, which I have pinned down very securely indeed. Get my little ruler and connect the dots and draw my lines. Once I have my pin tucks made, I will be serging around each piece just to make sure that it doesn't fray, but I want to get my pin tucks done first because it'll be less bulk down here. So I'm going to make these exactly the way that I did on the front, where I fold it, you know, like this, with the wrong sides together, and just at a 1/16 of an inch, make that stitch from where the circle is all the way down. As usual, before I take it completely away, in the back corner, I'm putting a letter B, so it's easy for me to remember which side of my sleeve is the front and the back. And as always, the back always has more notches than the front. So this one has 1 notch, so that's the front. This has 2 notches, so that is the back. Now, usually when they have these circles on here, they're going to want you to run some gathering threads between them to be able to ease things in. And I'm looking at the instructions, and I don't see anything about running gathering stitches. It just says match and baste or sew. So there you go. I'm just drawing my notches in here. I don't feel like clipping through my serging I just did. I actually want to skip ahead and hem up the bottom of my blouse before I do the sleeves. So I pulled out an oldie but goodie large rolled hem foot, because I haven't done that in a while. So up here in the placket, I'm not going to be using the rolled hem foot up there. I'll probably just by hand take a couple stitches in there, but I'm going to go ahead and get it folded so I can slip it in here and get it turned under. It's kind of awkward with the camera right there, but we'll see what we can do here. So I'm going to try to start my stitching right after that little placket area. Let me see here. The rolled hem feet are fabulous on straight, but I have a lot of curve going here, so I'm curious how it's going to work out. So basically, you just kind of turn it a little bit, and you can see here I'm coming up on a curve, so I'm trying to kind of form it there. But it's giving me a nice little hem so far. Well, here's what it ended up looking like. For the most part, it's good. Of course, it wouldn't go over all of this, which I knew ahead of time, so I'm going to have to whip that down by hand. The seam allowance where I was traveling in the same direction went pretty good. However, this seam allowance where I came it for the opposite direction, it just had a little hissy fit. So I'm just going to have to stitch that by hand right over there for that little bit. not a big deal. And then again here at the end. You know, in general, I think it saves time. I think it makes a nice, neat stitch, but you know, just be aware, going over thick seam allowances, usually they're not that happy. And up here, I'm gonna call it a night. It's kind of dark, getting kind of sleepy, and I will see you tomorrow. Good morning. I have about an hour before I need to leave for an appointment, so I'm going to try to get these sleeves finished up. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this center sleeve seam here and sew it at 5/8 of an inch and press that seam allowance open. Alright, so with that done, what they want you to do is hem up the bottom of your sleeves before you put them on. And they want you to turn it up 1 inch. So I just kind of drew myself a little line at 1 inch. It would be better if I drew it from the outside, obviously, but I can make this work. So once I get it turned up 1 inch, then I'm going to come back and turn under the top edge just so all my serging is hidden. They say 1/4 inch, but to me it's just so my serging is hidden. Pin that down, and then they want you to baste it in place and top stitch it over your basting on the outside. I am just going to machine stitch it along this edge. I think that that will be fine. So let me go ahead and get these pinned just like this all the way around. Okay, so I've got it all pinned. Now if you have a free arm machine, you can just stick it on. Since I have an old school flatbed machine, I turn mine right side out. And that way when I'm setting it on my machine, I open it up this way and I can just kind of rotate it and see what I'm doing that way. So this is how it looks. You do have to press down your tucks, and I just did it randomly, you know, whichever way they felt like going. All right, so I want to match up the right sleeve with the right side. So I've got 2 notches over here in my letter B, so I know this is the back, this is the front. This is my front, this is my back. So if I put them in here, right sides together, both my backs are on the same sides and my fronts are on the same side, which is a win. So I'm just going to match up this bottom seam here first, and then scoot up and match the shoulder seam with this center dot. Up here, hang on a second. Stick a pin through that dot so I can see exactly where that goes. Okay, and I am going to pin down both of the seam allowances just about halfway to hold them so they behave. So now I'm just going to match up the bottoms, and hopefully everything will ease into place because they did not want us to run gathering stitches. So I've got double notches back here in the back, which are matching up. And up in the front here, where is my notch? Well, I've got a notch on my sleeve, and it's probably going to be about the same on the bodice. So I'm going to pin that there. And then we have this stuff, okay? All of this easing. So I have a dot on this side. I'm going to stick my pin through there, a dot over here, stick my pin through there, and get that side, that part matched up. So now over here, you know, it's going to be too big on this, but that's okay. At the 5/8 inch point, they're going to match up. So not worrying about that, just sticking a pin there, and the same up here at the top. It looks like it's too big because of the rounding on the sleeve cap. It's not. At the 5/8 inch point, they match up perfectly. So I'm just going to put a pin there and pin the rest of the sleeve together. I'll be sewing it at 5/8 of an inch all the way around first, and then come back and do a second row of stitching 1/8 of an inch in. So I have 2 rows of stitching going around here. Okay, so I hope you can see my 2 rows of stitching there. So now between my notches, what I'm going to do is get my scissors and come in and trim fairly close to that second row of stitching. The second row will keep it from unraveling, and trimming it down will make it a lot more comfortable to wear. Okay, so now that is the sleeve. So my sleeves are on. They went on great. I'm kind of in a rush, so I think what I'm going to do is mark the position for my buttons to be sewed on, and then grab them and take them with me because I'm going to have some waiting time and I can just sew them on while I'm waiting. So what I'm doing is I am lining up my front plackets so that the lines on my plaid kind of match. And I know this is a keyhole buttonhole, and traditionally the button placement would be at the keyhole. I'm going to be putting it in the center just because that's where you usually do for an up and down blouse position, you know? We just do what we can do here. So let me see if that came through. Yes, I have all of my little buttons positions marked. Got my buttons. I'm going to head out the door, grab a thread, a needle, a thimble, put it in a little pack, and I will be back shortly. Okay, well, I like it. I love the 3/4 length sleeves. I think they are the best because they cover up all of this, but they're not long enough to get in your way. And so today is a very wet, cold February day where everything is mud outside. So I am just hanging out in here on the porch today with my troublesome cat, but I like it. So I hope all of that full bust adjustment stuff that I did where I incorporated it into these tucks was not too confusing. When I had that mess up with the packing tape, I know it got a little bit too shiny to see, but I hope that you're able to follow that. And I am glad I did that because I don't know if you can tell, but it is, well, I wouldn't say it's tight. You know, I have some room here. But I think that by adding that extra, I get more the line that the design was intended to. I'm afraid it would be a little bit tighter and it might have restricted some movement. So I like it. If you have this pattern, you might have noticed that there is another pattern that is a pair of pants that is like the partner that goes with it. And I am going to be doing those pants next time. So I hope you watch that and I will see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, reality city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.